All right, black and white sports reporters. Well, guess what? The Players Union actually sent a counter proposal to the WNBA. And the WNBA promptly rejected it into outer space. They Dikembe Mutombo'd that thing right back into the sun and said, we are not doing this revenue sharing thing. We keep telling you that.
The WNBA blasted the players' most recent proposal into thin air rather than merely rejecting it. The league's offices echoed with a defiant no. The administration of Adam Silver wasted no time in calling the entire package unrealistic and putting a stop to requests for gross revenue sharing that the league claimed would simply destroy profitability. There was no negotiation here. It was a strict shutdown that exacerbated a deadlock that now jeopardizes the season's opening. An immediate explosive crisis results from players' basic demands colliding with the harsh realities of business. The league's message was unambiguous. No agreement on these terms. Instead of just rejecting the players' latest request, the WNBA blasted it into thin air. A defiant no reverberated through the league's offices. Adam Silver's government lost little time in denouncing the entire package as unrealistic and blocking proposals for gross revenue sharing, which the league argued would merely ruin profitability. There was no negotiation here. Strict shutdown conditions worsened a stalemate that now threatens the start of the season. When players' fundamental needs clash with the hard realities of business, an immediate explosive crisis ensues. The message from the league was clear. No consensus on these terms.
Write this off as an owner, so we don't care if you lose money. And it's like, okay, but you got to remember that's coming from somebody that their ideology, their personal political ideology is they hate capitalism. You got to remember that. And a lot of these players have that same ideology. So how do you talk business with somebody like that doesn't care? I mean, who doesn't want the business they work for to be fruitful and profitable and blah, blah? I mean, what are you doing there?
Star Natasha Cloud's notorious remark that owners may just write things off if they lose money epitomizes the astonishing conceptual divide that underlies this harsh rejection. According to league insiders, this startling remark exposes a fundamental worldview of some players who despise capitalism in general, making any economic deal seem unachievable. When one side rejects the idea of financial returns as irrelevant, how can you come to a consensus on profitability? This ingrained set of beliefs prevents real progress by forming an impenetrable divide. Negotiating with a portion of the workforce that blatantly disregards the core ideas of corporate sustainability presents the WNBA's leadership with an unprecedented difficulty. This goes beyond merely disagreeing on percentages. The entire business is at risk due to a conflict of worldviews. With a union that doesn't appear to care about a team's financial performance, the league is finding it difficult to understand how to create a prosperous future. The core of the current impasse is this ideological conflict, which is driving both sides to the verge of collapse.
Including some concessions. I don't understand why all of this comes out late at night. They try to put this stuff out at night because they're trying to tamper down the blowback, and I'm not kidding you. All the news cycles are over with for the day, yada, yada, yada. That's exactly why they do this, so they won't get dragged as much throughout the day. I kid you not. Submitted a counter proposal to the WNBA on Tuesday that included some concessions on revenue sharing and housing. Sources told
Late Tuesday night, the WNBPA, the Players Union, submitted its updated counter proposal. Many people think this was a premeditated strategy to hide the news and lessen negative publicity. Some compromises on income sharing and important housing issues were included in this late-hour delivery, which was intended to elude daily news cycles. However, the league rejected the union immediately and categorically in spite of these purported concessions, demonstrating the complete futility of the union's deliberate timing. The proposal's midnight drop did not lessen the impact of its contents. Rather, it brought attention to the stark divide that still exists. This strategy, which is frequently employed to control public opinion, backfired catastrophically and increased attention to the tense negotiations. Even after a covert submission, the league's fast and public dismissal demonstrated how fundamentally apart the two sides still are on economic issues. The WNBPA's attempt to steer the conversation ultimately backfired, raising further concerns about their strategy.
That the teams continued to provide housing in the first several years of the new agreement, but that in later years, teams no longer be obligated to provide housing for players making close to the maximum salary on multi-year deals and receiving full salary protection. That makes sense. Why should they keep paying for housing if they're making all this money? I mean, it's like, go out on your own and live your own life. And all we do is we pay your salaries. Yeah, that's wild. It's wild. WNBA teams are required to provide housing.
The union's demands are incredibly detailed, particularly in light of the league's present financial difficulties. Over the term of the deal, the WNBPA is now requesting an average of 27.5% of gross revenue, which is revenue before any expenses are subtracted. Even while this number is somewhat lower than their prior 31% demand, the league still cannot afford it. Additionally, they suggested a salary cap of somewhat less than $9.5 million for the first year, or 25%. The main source of controversy is Adam Silver's office's obstinate emphasis on gross revenue rather than net, which makes the entire package untenable. Because they cannot see how a business can function by sharing earnings before taking into consideration the massive costs of operating a professional sports league, the WNBA views this as a surefire route to financial catastrophe. A significant gap between player expectations and economic reality is evident in this one demand, which has the potential to ruin the entire transaction.
Wow. WNBA fires back at Players Union over unrealistic counter proposal. I mean, if there would have been ink involved in that statement, it wouldn't have been dry. And the WNBA swatted this joker down. Adam Silver said, nah, get out, nah. We're not doing that because for some reason you don't know the difference between gross revenue and net revenue. WNBA released a fiery statement late Tuesday night calling the Players Union latest collective bargaining agreement proposal.
The WNBA's anger stems not only from the percentage, but also from the proposal's definition of gross revenue. The league contends that splitting revenue before costs are subtracted would result in losses for their teams totaling hundreds of millions of dollars, a situation they find intolerable. They are advocating for a model that takes into account the true costs of conducting business and want the gross portion completely eliminated. This is not a small semantic quarrel. The talks have come to a standstill due to a fundamental dispute over financial accounting. They see the union's demand for gross revenue as an existential threat, and the league's survival depends on a sustainable financial model. Players' goals are pitted against the harsh realities of profitability in a struggle that goes beyond who gets what to the league's basic economic foundation. The league maintains that this definition is a red line that cannot be negotiated.
Prior to that, included some concessions on several hot-button topics. You can't call that revenue sharing. I mean, come on. They dropped it 2.5%. The league wants them to drop the gross part altogether because it's gross. But the WNBA said its modifications were not enough, and the proposal as it stands, quote, would cause hundreds of millions of dollars of losses for our teams. Well, according to Natasha Cloud, just write it off. Write it off. No big deal. They don't care if these owners ever make any money off this league. It's so wild to me. We still need to complete two.
The players' housing-related suggestions added still another level of complexity to the intricate negotiations. For the first few years of the new agreement, they recommended that teams keep providing lodgings. Later on, though, the need would be removed for players who had full salary protection and made nearly the maximum amount on multi-year contracts. This concession seems to make some sense at first glance. When athletes are well-paid and financially secure, why should clubs cover their housing expenses? However, the WNBA quickly rejected this entire package, indicating that even these seemingly sensible changes were insufficient to get past the enormous financial obstacle of gross revenue sharing. The league's sweeping rejection shows a deeper, more structural issue that goes beyond one or two particular demands and points to a total lack of confidence in the union's overall economic sustainability. Not even partial concessions were enough to influence them. With the 2026 season set to start in just 80 days, time is running out and tensions are sharply rising. The league still has to finish 2 drafts and negotiate free agency before training camps can even start, so this extremely tight timeframe puts even more strain on the already strained negotiations. "We are running out of time," emphasized a league representative, highlighting the seriousness of the situation and the possibility of significant interruption. On the other hand, the WNBA's plan was hailed as a major victory for present players and future generations, emphasizing their conviction that a viable league eventually serves the interests of everybody. This contrast aims to promote an immediate, possibly unsustainable gains, while the other places more emphasis on long-term health, resulting in a standoff with disastrous consequences. Every day has been a crucial defeat due to the approaching deadline, bringing the league closer to an unheard-of disaster. Throughout these negotiations, which have already lasted 16 months, the WNBA has continuously emphasized how vital business sustainability and wellness are. This is more than simply rhetoric. It serves as the foundation for their whole denial of the union's requests. ESPN was informed by a person with knowledge of the matter that the league believes the players' most recent plan would still result in a staggering $460 million in losses. This number isn't just for fun. It forms the basis of their objection to the current plan. The WNBA thinks their position on revenue sharing is a matter of survival since they are unable to function appropriately under such financial pressure. Their emphasis on long-term sustainability stands in direct opposition to the union's urgent demands, posing an obstacle that appears insurmountable. Even if it means going up against player expectations head-on, the league remains unwavering in its commitment to creating a financially stable future, exposing the profound structural conflict at work. However, the players do have some theories of their own. Allegedly, some union members think the owners may be falsifying the records, arguing that the stated losses are inflated or made up to support smaller player shares. However, this charge unproven undermines confidence and makes real communication very challenging, which greatly hampers negotiations. When one party suspects the other of being blatantly dishonest, how can you negotiate effectively? Whether justified or not, this pervasive mistrust is contaminating the bargaining process and impeding any meaningful advancement. The WNBA strongly refutes these allegations, but the fact that players even have such a view shows how deeply mistrustful this entire process is. This charge turns a financial disagreement into a moral one, rendering compromise all but impossible and further dividing the two parties, fostering an atmosphere of animosity and uncertainty. The primary difficulty, as expressed by the league's irate negotiators, are trying to strike a deal with people who appear to ignore sensible business practices. If a substantial percentage of the player base truly feels that owners need to be unwilling to lose hundreds of millions of dollars, then discovering common, laying the foundation for a successful future becomes an exercise in vain. It's not just about negotiating aggressively. It concerns a conflict between basic economic comprehension. The league finds it difficult to balance its need for sustainability from a union standpoint that seems to put other values ahead of money. Feasibility. It presents an almost query that cannot be answered. When someone doesn't seem to care whether a firm is profitable, how can you persuade them to operate in the best interests of the company? The core of the impasse is this conceptual stalemate, which renders conventional negotiating strategies futile and exacerbates the existing problem. There are obvious indications of a split inside the players' union itself, which further exacerbates the internal turmoil. Some players, like Natasha Cloud, are apparently voicing concerns and a wish for a more practical approach, while others strongly support the current demands. The idea that owners should just write off losses is not shared by all players. Most certainly, a quiet majority is aware of the essential to a successful league. The union's negotiation stance is weakened by this internal disagreement, which also raises questions and may reduce its collective bargaining ability. Although a sufficient number of Natasha clouds might potentially endanger the entire season, more and more players are probably concerned about the repercussions of taking such a firm stand. Maintaining a united front during ongoing talks is made more challenging by this crucial, frequently invisible internal union conflict. The WNBA considers it risky for wealthy owners to simply write off club losses from other real estate or investment endeavors, as several players have urged. Oversimplification. Although tax write-offs are available, they do not eliminate the need for a successful company or fully offset the estimated operational losses of hundreds of millions of dollars. Even wealthy investors would never choose a write-off over a sizable profit check. This argument trivializes the significant financial investment needed to operate a professional sports league, hence misinterpreting the motivations driving corporate ownership. Regardless of an owner's external portfolio, the league contends that ongoing losses are unsustainable and would eventually cause the business. The league's negotiating team is even more irritated by this rejection of fundamental financial reasoning, which widens the divide between the two parties. The most formidable obstacle to a new CBA continues to be the impasse over the revenue-sharing issue. Players on one side are emphatic that they would not compromise on their demand for a sizable portion of gross revenue, which they consider to be non-negotiable. The WNBA has little leeway because of the strong position taken by important union members, who have consistently declared that this specific demand will result in disastrous losses. On this crucial issue, neither side seems prepared to compromise, creating an unbreakable impasse. The league observes this as a means of surviving financially. This conflict of strongly held beliefs, where neither side is willing to make concessions on the central issue, guarantees that the negotiations stay at a complete standstill even if the union sees it as an entitlement. This seemingly intractable desire is where the season's fate really rests. The harsh truth is that there is already a sizable rift or division among the participants over these divisive demands. Not all WNBPA members are in complete agreement with a harsh strategy. Some are clearly more interested in having a season than in waiting for what the league considers to be unreasonable demands. This internal conflict is a strong but unsaid pressure throughout the talks. It is challenging to put on a genuinely united appearance when a union is divided. The league is well aware of these internal conflicts, which could affect their own approach in the hopes that enough players would finally demand a settlement. This lack of total unity within the WNBPA raises the possibility that not all players share the union's official position, which adds an element of unpredictability and volatility to the situation. Now, the question is if there is a situation in which the WNBA could just say, "Believe it," and move forward with rookies or replacement players in the event that a settlement cannot be made. This drastic choice, although it is rarely used in professional sports, it is a horrifying option that has the potential to completely change the league. Could the WNBA encourage individual players to sign a final, non-negotiable deal, so avoiding the union? Despite the legal complexity brought up by collective bargaining procedures, the desperation on both sides raises the possibility that extraordinary measures could be taken. Though not at any financial expense, the WNBA has a stake in having a season. Even if it is doubtful, investigating different player pools shows how severe the current standoff is. This speculative scenario highlights how serious the situation has gotten, compelling both parties to take action that were previously unimaginable. The situation facing the athlete is dire. They are collectively obligated by functioning as a union, which can have both positive and negative effects. Individual players cannot just break ranks and accept an offer if the union rejects it, even though it gives them strength and unity in negotiations. They have essentially screwed themselves with this collective agreement, since the union's overall strategy may take precedence over individual financial concerns. This arrangement, which is meant to empower, actually sets up a trap where many people's careers and salaries could be held captive by the unyielding position of a select few. Due to the union's responsibility to fairly represent each member, a few hardliners have the power to thwart an agreement that would appease the majority, putting tremendous internal pressure on others who just want to play and escalating their dissatisfaction. Some keen observers hold a pessimistic view despite the constant discourse of positivity. There is a genuine fear that we won't get a season at all for the first time. This goes beyond just negotiating. The intractable nature of the revenue-sharing conflict and the ideological divide between the two parties are the real causes of this worry. The players, teams, and the league's growing popularity would all suffer greatly from the possibility of a postponed season. This grim forecast illustrates the stark deficiency of development and the uncompromising stances adopted by both parties, turning what ought to be a dialogue into a potentially devastating impasse. Following the refusal, Adam Silver's office remained silent, which betrays a serious fear that this problem would actually turn into an unprecedented cancellation. However, there is still a ray of hope, although a small one. An agreement will probably be reached at the last minute, in the dead of night, after tremendous pressure has finally forced a breakthrough, according to the cynical wisdom of sports negotiations. One night in roughly 3 weeks at 10:50 p.m. is the frequently recited prophecy for such high-stakes decisions. Many people believe that the only way an agreement can be reached is in this last-ditch situation, where fatigue and the approaching deadline ultimately force compromise. It emphasizes the brinkmanship present in these discussions by implying that neither side will actually compromise until the very last second. With the future of women's professional basketball hanging in the balance and awaiting that crucial late-night call, the WNBA and WNBPA are engaged in a high-stakes game of chicken. Adam Silver's firm shutdown of player requests highlighted a deep ideological conflict over the WNBA CBA, indicating that the upheaval is far from finished. League's financial framework itself. An unusual stalemate has resulted from the conflict between player aspirations and financial reality, which could potentially ruin a whole season. As time runs out, it's not just about homes or numbers. It's also about whether a common vision for a lucrative, sustainable future can emerge from this profound divide of mistrust and divergent beliefs. The league's existence is in jeopardy. A sobering reminder that, even in athletics, pragmatic considerations can trump enthusiasm, necessitating compromise and a shared comprehension of what it really takes to achieve. This goes beyond simple negotiating. The WNBA is fighting for its soul.